In the years 1973 to 1975, wheat aid was reduced from 491,000 tons to a mere 50,000 tons. Ethiopia. 5 million people are threatened with starvation. World grain production has dropped for the second year running, and that of the developing countries in particular is totally insufficient.
I remember very well in 1974 that there was a great deal of hunger and poverty in many parts of the world, especially the low-income countries. The General Assembly of the United Nations at that time realized that this must be tackled and called for Foreign Minister Conference in Rome. The conference actually looked at many proposals. After very difficult discussion, they found it would be the best to create the International Fund for Agricultural Development. For the sake of history, I must say that King Faisal, the King of Saudi Arabia, at that time approved the creation of IFAD within 3 days of the discussion of the foreign ministers in Rome. That was a breakthrough. One of the main points discussed were the sharing of resources with a major contribution from OPEC, as well as developed countries with very small contribution from developing. But the most important idea about this is the cooperation of the three groups. I think IFAD was different from other institutions, and it was a catalyst. The Grameen Bank, supported by IFAD, had profound effect on other institutions to go ahead and encourage giving poor men and women small loans so that they can start their own business. It was difficult, it was challenging, it was uneasy, it was unpredictable, but I was highly optimistic, and I was lucky to find very good professionals to assist me in reaching the goals that IFAD is created for.
In those days, in the 1980s, people would look at poverty as a kind of a soft option to development, dealt with through trickle-down effects of development focused on productive, quote-unquote, sectors. What IFAD tried to demonstrate is that, hey, those smallholder farmers and artisanal fishermen have a tremendous potential, but it's just a lack of imagination of policymakers that has not enabled them to unleash this productive potential. And IFAD was demonstrating that this can be done. My own input into the organization was to try to reinforce the capacity of IFAD to become a nursery for new project ideas. Therefore, by increasing substantially the part of IFAD funding that would be devoted to IFAD-initiated projects. One of the issues that I'm particularly proud of, the recognition of the key role of women in fighting hunger. I was very privileged to initiate the largest summit ever held in Geneva of first wives of heads of states and heads of governments and other female leaders to give the media backing to the views that women from the field came up to the rostrum and said, please listen to us. I still hear the voice of Audrey Hepburn, who was reading the final declaration.
We, the wives of heads of state or government, have gathered here to express our solidarity with the rural women of the world.
As I was about to leave, a year before, I met with some of my colleagues and said, look, we have to put pencil on paper and try and conceptualize on this experience that we have learned. And we tried by preparing this book on the state of world rural poverty. It was through writing it that I really realized the absolutely extraordinary experience that I lived in those 8 years.
In the early 90s, unfortunately, the world was moving away from agriculture and looking at more in terms of countries and governance, but losing track of particularly things like agriculture. Much of the development community were asking, should you have IFAD? Is there a need for it?
Governors, I am confident that with God's help and your cooperation...
One of my first jobs was to work on doing probably IFAD's first evaluation. So we did an external evaluation, and again, one of the critical items there was let them go and visit the projects and let them talk to the people, because that's where they will get a good understanding of what the work IFAD is doing. And within that, their conclusion was that IFAD is needed more at that time than at any other time. We had areas where you could do work for 20 years, and then there's a conflict. It's all gone. All the infrastructure you've built, all the savings that these poor families have accumulated, however little it is, it's all gone. You literally have to start from scratch all over again. But the thing to look at is what would have happened if we weren't there. Eventually, the success of a project is not IFAD or anybody else. It's those individuals, it's the families working at the rural level. They're going to make this project successful. As long as we have an institution that is able to speak for these people and make sure that we are able to go into the large institutions and the large groups, the NGOs, and speak the cause, it does make a difference.
The structure of IFAD and the fact that we were a partnership with the OPEC countries, the OECD countries, and other developing countries is key. Why is this key? Because it points to the future. Our tripartite structure, our broad engagement and involvement in the governance, in the funding, in the management of this fund by a broad range of countries, that points to the future. That's true multilateralism.
It's a great privilege for me to share with the views and expectations of the government and people of Mozambique on its efforts to eradicate poverty and contributions of IFAD.
What is new is the realization that those most affected by climate change will very often be those that are least responsible for the cause of it and those that are most poor, most excluded, but relying on agriculture. So we need to help rural communities to adapt to it. We also need to see that the production capacity is maintained or even reinforced, because we have one other big problem, and that's the tremendous rise in food prices. Food prices is a key challenge for any household living on less than $1 a day, having to buy food. At the same time, it provides an opportunity to invest in smallholder farmers. And I think a vision we could share is that smallholder farmers across the world shouldn't be seen as a poverty problem. They should be seen as a part of the solution to managing the effects of climate change and to grow the food to meet the very rapidly growing demand. We know that in a remarkable short time, 20 years, 30 years, you can go from a very destitute situation to one which has hope and a standard of living that's a good step towards affluence. And this is the message, that development is possible. We have many examples. We just need to focus, get the investments, political support, and the funding to complete the agenda. And the agenda is not to reach the MDGs, because that's only halving poverty. The agenda is to eradicate poverty, but we know it's doable, and that's the great inspiration for us.